in the region. He was one of the pioneers in youth mobilization for the environment. He trained as an engineer and energy planner at the University of Rajasthan, India, and University of Pennsylvania, USA. During his career as an energy engineer for the Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, he traveled to remote areas to install renewable energy technologies. He then launched the Environment Camp for Conservation Awareness, ECCA, which mobilized young people and school children, enabling them to learn outside the classroom. He worked in IUCN Nepal for over 7 years. His work has been recognized by Asoka Fellow and Rolex Award. In 1993, he was selected as one of the 100 global leaders for tomorrow, awardees at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He is also a climate ambassador for WWF Nepal program. Now I would like to ask Mr. Chitrakar to address the forum.
These are typical pictures or images that we are shown most of the time on our TV or in the media. But the little story that I want to tell you is about a rabbit, who is jumping around and then comes to a tree and there's a crow on top of the tree. So the rabbit asks the crow, "What are you doing?" And the crow says, "I'm doing nothing." So the rabbit says, "Can I also do nothing?" So the crow says, "Sure, you can do nothing." So the rabbit sits and does nothing. Right? So there's a wolf that comes along and eats the rabbit. The moral of the story is that only those at the top can afford to do nothing. Right? So we have to do something. If you get this basic premise that it is not just about knowing the data, not understanding the satellite images, but also feeling that this is something that's going to affect me and I will not be spared. I have to do something. Right? So the number of images that are getting saturated almost in our brain is something that we have to be a little cautious about. Okay? The second thing, with this picture also, is that in this region, we suffer from what we call a victim's syndrome. If anything goes wrong, we would like to project ourselves as victims. And hence all the reports, all the conversations, all the demands that we put forth are articulated from the perspective of a victim. Whereas, if you think that you know enough about climate change, if the world is moving towards a zero carbon or a carbon neutral economy, I think this region actually has the lead. And so think of these presentations as a leader and not as a victim. Because believe me, the world loves a good victim. Right? So don't ever think of yourself as a victim, but as people who can actually lead into this sector. Now, the next thing I just want to present here is that we are talking to young people here. Right? So when young people see images like this, right, the media, the reports, and then you get quite tired because you live in a world where, for example, in order to justify a war, like the war in Iraq, I think you need only one page of intelligence. Right? But in climate change, you can have many reports, and yet nothing happens. Right? So it's a very research or academic heavy sector, and it's not as fascinating as a war game or watching battles or wars in the world. Right? So that's probably where the frustration, right? And that patience also begins to wear out because people will always justify another study, another research. And so the tendency would also be that young people get tired. Now look at this, Google map of the region where we all live, and think, look at the snow, caps and the water. And if you think that in 1931, because somebody discovered oil in Saudi Arabia, there are about 900 young Nepalese who migrate to the Gulf each day because of this wealth that has come from oil. Right? Now, if I ask you, in about 20 years' time, if the world switched to lithium ion as the preferred storage for battery, which country is going to become rich? So can somebody guess? Which country is going to become really rich if we switch to lithium ion as our storage battery? There you go. So you have to ask gray-haired people sometimes. Andrea says, Bolivia. So it's not a question of going back to 1931 and saying oil. It is being present in 2010 and saying Bolivia, because that's where the lithium is. Or being in South Asia and saying this is where the water is. So it's going to be just like oil in 1931. And so I think that's what you mean by recognize the opportunities, is that as a real resource that we have. Okay. Now, are we completely unsuccessful? Have we always failed? No. Today, Nepal, economically, weak, country, can boast that almost 24% of its land area is protected areas, and an additional 14% of the land area is community managed. And so we know how to say with information that we are a failure or we cannot do it. So we can learn from past successes and say, I think we know how to do it. As our mindset, look at this picture. What does it mean, to be of a certain age? It means to be able to tell yourself, we can do it. Okay? Anger is a very good emotion because you say, this is not acceptable. Okay to make mistakes, as long as we learn from those mistakes. And so making mistakes is part of that progress, that we must all become part of. In this region where we live, one of the biggest challenges is that, the basic principle that we have to internalize is that the enemy of good is perfect. We strive for so many things that are perfect, like perfect 5-year plans, perfect 3-year plans. And look at the economy, right? A good plan would be good enough because it is okay to make mistakes, as we move along. And so here is a slide, which shows 16-year-old, girl from Australia gone around the world. Now, even in this room, I'll tell you, how many of you think you're already too old for this thing? How many are still below 16? You see, you've already missed your opportunity. Right? So time doesn't wait for anybody, including you. Okay? So look at this. Sometimes Nepalese are also of this fatalistic gurung who for a time had a catwalk in Manhattan. A very Nepali. Country, the passport name is written. It has to do with our individual skills, our dedication, and the will to move forward. So we know that a gurung kid from Nepal can excel in the fashion world in Manhattan. Right? So it's just a mindset that we must have. Now, I just want to also go into a little picture that I want to show here. Back one. And so, but here are a group of young people, youth in Nepal, who are helping me to assemble solar home lighting systems for rural areas. Now, what we know is that the villagers in Nepal are using kerosene for light and disposable batteries for the radio. So what we did was basically design a 3-watt system which charges 2 nickel metal hydrate storage, and it runs 2 LED sets. And so this is enough to offset the kerosene usage as well as the disposable batteries. Building them is young Nepalese who are building them. Who is training them? Young Nepalese are training them. So it's an enterprise that has been created because the world wants to move towards a carbon neutral economy. Okay? Let's look at the next picture. Who are the first generation in the region who actually have gone to school? Their parents don't understand wires, plus, minus, or nickel metal hydrate. But these kids can be taught easily because they're the first generation that went to school. And so who teaches the parents and the children? It's the children. And so as a result of this, I just want to show you this picture. You have villages and villages and villages where children now study with a clean light, also listen to the rays. In order to reduce the cost of this set, we took the panel out and we put the panel on the school roof. So every morning the children have to come to school in order to set. So what a great way to get to 100% enrollment. Right? So people have tried all kinds of things, but this really works. Right? So they come to school to charge the set. Okay? Now, if you understand the carbon economy, so we've already got young people. Guess how we finance this? So it is a saving and credit scheme whereby the set is given to the family on credit, and every day they save the 10 cents that they would have otherwise spent on kerosene and battery. But where do you get the money to finance a scheme like this? Well, the $100,000 I have at ACE Development Bank, which pays for the warehousing, actually came through carbon credits for displacing the. So we just have to be innovative. Solutions are there. It takes a mindset to understand this. But just to reiterate what Andrea says, this is an opportunity. It's not just a problem, it's not just a challenge, but it's a real opportunity that we have to recognize, and then we have to take it forward. Okay. So let us, bring back, to a real understanding about why an event like this is really critical. Okay. So we do not have the luxury to do another experiment. Believe me, if you know human nature, if we had a spare planet, this conference would not be happening, because we would destroy this planet and just move to the next planet. Right? The fact that we have only one planet makes us poor. That's the real definition of poverty. And so we have to take care of this. And when you think of 7 billion people, and these numbers are thrown all the time, right? 7 billion. If you try to understand what 7 billion really means, it means that 1 out of every 2, that's what 7 billion people means. So if you take the whole history of humankind on Earth, right, 1 out of every 2 human beings ever born in the history of this Earth is alive today. So that's how many people we are talking about. And so the message, that we have to also send from here is that just the year before the dinosaurs, became extinct, probably they also wore a T-shirt that said "Save the Earth." Right? So the point is, it's not the Earth that we are trying to save; it's us that we are trying to save. So if you do not mind being, pushed out of your village, if you don't mind to migrate, if you don't mind, moving to a completely different because your old habitat was destroyed, that's okay. But the point is, when 7 billion people have to move from this Earth, we don't have an alternative. And so I think the NASA, pictures, the global data is very critical, because I'm sure forums like this are happening all over the world, and so it affects everybody, regardless of what nationality or what passports you actually carry. Okay, so I just want to end on a more positive note by basically saying that in our tradition, in our culture, we have many stories that we tell. And so one story that we always tell is about a king who wanted to build a milk pond. It's a very common story, but I just want to reiterate it so that we're all on the same page. Milk, into that pond. So 3 o'clock in the morning, when we'll 1 bucket of water make a pond full of milk. Now about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, when the king goes to inspect the milk pond, guess what happened? Not a single drop of milk, because everybody thought the same way last night. Because everybody said, what difference does 1 bucket of water make? And so everybody sneaked up into the pond at night and put 1 bucket of water into it. So sometimes when we discuss global commons, okay, the problem is that it is always about a little and a little bit that I contribute. And it doesn't look very significant. But you multiply that 7 billion times, and it makes a big difference. And so one of the messages that we have to take is a small something is much better than a big nothing. And believe me, we've heard enough about big nothings. And so it's the small somethings, that we have to really, focus on. So let me, end. I'm, really grateful to be here. It's not about, being more articulate. It's really about having the spirit for saying, I understand, I get it. Now I know a little more. And so I'm going to translate that knowledge into actually, some action. And so again, to reiterate the word action, because that's where will get us, to the next stage. And believe me, if you do it, the success will be enough of an impetus to keep you, going. And I'm sure in subsequent years, you'll be up here speaking, to the youth of tomorrow. Thank you very much.